I still remember the exact second my heart started lying to me, long before my mind caught up. It's strange how love can feel like betrayal before it ever feels like joy. Before I tell you what happened next, if stories like this move you, hit subscribe to RP, Forbidden Romances, leave a like, and drop a comment so we know to keep bringing you more. It helps more than you'd think. My name is Emma Hale, and 2 years ago, I thought I had my whole life figured out. I was a junior at the University of Texas, the kind of girl who always had a plan. I had a boyfriend named Tyler, a tight circle of friends, and a calendar full of study groups and football games. My life felt steady, predictable in the best way. I liked routine. I liked knowing what came next. I never imagined that one single night, dressed up in a costume for a party I almost skipped, would end up rewriting everything I thought I knew about myself. That night was an autumn costume party at one of the fraternity houses near campus, the kind with string lights strung between old oak trees and music spilling out into the yard. Tyler went as a pirate, laughing too loud before we even got there, already halfway through his first drink. I wore an ice blue gown, hair braided over one shoulder, feeling pretty and a little bit invisible at the same time, the way you do when you're used to being someone's girlfriend, more than being just yourself. I remember standing in front of my mirror before we left, adjusting the same strand of hair 3 times, though I couldn't have told you why. Something in me felt unsettled that night, like my body already knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. I brushed it off as nerves about the party, about seeing people I hadn't seen since summer. I had no idea that somewhere across town, another girl was staring at her own reflection a little too long, for reasons she wasn't ready to admit either. Her name was Vivian Cole. I didn't know her yet, not really, though our boyfriends were close friends from the same fraternity. Jack, her boyfriend, was easily one of the kindest guys I'd ever met, dressed as Robin Hood that night, always remembering people's names, always checking if everyone had a drink in hand. He was the kind of boyfriend other girls said Vivian was lucky to have. I didn't disagree. I just didn't know yet how much that kindness would end up hurting me later, in ways I couldn't have predicted. When we walked into that party, the air was warm with laughter and string lights, and for a moment, everything felt exactly the way it was supposed to feel. Tyler pulled me toward the drinks table, already trading jokes with Jack like they hadn't seen each other in years instead of days. And that's when I saw her for the first time, dressed as Black Widow. Red hair falling in soft waves, dark leather catching the string lights just right. I remember thinking she looked like she belonged in a magazine, effortless in a way that made me feel instantly, quietly smaller. Jack introduced us with an easy smile, his hand resting briefly on Vivian's shoulder, the way you'd expect from someone who loved his girlfriend without complication. She shook my hand, and I swear, it lasted 1 second longer than any normal introduction should. Her perfume lingered in the air between us, something warm and unfamiliar, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I noticed it again minutes later, still clinging faintly to my own sleeve. I told myself it meant nothing. People shake hands. People smell nice. I was overthinking it, the way I sometimes did after too little sleep and too much caffeine. But there was something underneath that first exchange. Something I didn't have a name for yet. A low hum of awareness that stayed with me even as I turned back to Tyler. Even as I laughed at something Jack said a moment later. It was the kind of feeling you notice only in hindsight, once it's already too late to unfeel it. As the night went on, Jack pulled me into a slow dance near the edge of the yard. Ever the gentleman. Always thoughtful, even in small moments. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear without thinking twice about it. The kind of gesture that should have felt sweet and uncomplicated. Instead, it left a strange knot in my stomach. One I didn't understand yet. A quiet guilt for reasons I couldn't put into words. I remember glancing over his shoulder, searching the crowd without meaning to, until I found her eyes already finding mine. Neither of us looked away right away. It was barely a second, maybe 2. but it felt like something had shifted quietly in the air between us, invisible to everyone else at that party. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just the wine, just the noise, just the strange electricity that comes with new people and low lighting. But deep down, in a place I wasn't ready to listen to yet, I think I already knew something had started that night, something soft and dangerous, and impossible to take back. I just didn't know yet how far it would go, or how much it would cost me to find out. Jack and Tyler had been friends long before any of us started dating them, and that history showed the moment the drink started flowing. Within an hour, the two of them were louder than everyone else combined, retelling the same joke about a football game from 2 years earlier as if it were brand new information. I remember catching Vivian's eye across the yard during one particularly dramatic retelling, and the way her mouth curved just slightly, like she was trying not to laugh at the same thing I was trying not to laugh at. It's a strange kind of bond, laughing quietly at the same absurd thing someone else finds hilarious. There's an intimacy in it that doesn't need words, a shared understanding that says, "I see what you see," without either person having to admit it out loud. I didn't think much of it in that moment. I just thought, this girl gets it, in the easy way you think about anyone who seems to share your sense of humor. I had no idea that this small, harmless connection would end up being the first thread of something far bigger. As the night stretched on, Tyler wrapped an arm around my shoulder, his words already beginning to blur at the edges, his laugh a half-second too long for whatever joke he'd just made. I smiled and played along, the way you do when you love someone and you're used to being the steady one in the relationship. Across the yard, Jack was doing his best impression of a pirate captain giving orders, and Vivian was watching him with an expression I recognized immediately because I wore it myself just seconds earlier. It was fondness tangled up with quiet exhaustion, the look of someone who loves a person but is tired of being the only sober one in the room. She caught me watching and, instead of looking away, she walked over, 2 drinks in hand, offering me one like we'd already agreed on something without speaking. "I think we're on babysitting duty tonight," she said, nodding toward the boys, who were now attempting to recreate some kind of victory dance from a game none of us actually remembered clearly. I laughed. Really laughed. For the first time all night. And something about the sound of her laugh mixing with mine made the noise of the party fade back a little. We ended up near the edge of the yard, half watching the boys, half just talking. She told me she'd been dating Jack for almost 2 years, that everyone assumed her life was completely put together because she never let anything show otherwise. I told her about Tyler, about how easy things were with him most of the time, how comfortable and familiar it all felt. Neither of us said anything particularly deep in that moment, but there was an ease in the conversation that felt different from the small talk I usually had with strangers. At one point, a girl named Sophie walked by and waved warmly at me, someone from one of my classes that semester. Easygoing and a little too confident in the best way. I waved back, introduced her quickly to Vivian, and we exchanged a few pleasant words before Sophie drifted off toward another group. It was such a small, forgettable moment at the time, just one more face in a crowded yard. I couldn't have known then how much that name would come to matter later. The boys got louder as the night went on, stumbling through another retelling of the same football story, this time with even less accuracy than before. Vivian rolled her eyes at Jack with a kind of tired affection, and I found myself doing the exact same thing at Tyler without even meaning to mirror her. It struck me, in a small offhand way, how similar our situations felt in that moment. 2 women quietly managing 2 men who had clearly had 1 drink too many. I remember thinking, at least I'm not the only one dealing with this tonight, and feeling strangely comforted by that thought. Every few minutes, our eyes would find each other again, almost like checking in, silently asking, "Are you seeing this too?" There was nothing dramatic about it, nothing that would have looked unusual to anyone watching from the outside. But something about those small, repeated glances started to feel less like coincidence and more like a rhythm, a quiet back and forth neither of us was naming out loud. I told myself it was just the natural closeness that comes from sharing an inside joke at a party. Nothing more complicated than that. Then Tyler said something so ridiculous, so completely out of nowhere, that I burst out laughing before I could stop myself. Vivian caught my eye at the exact same second, already laughing too, and for a moment it felt like the two of us were the only people actually paying attention to how absurd the night had become. Our laughter overlapped, genuine and unguarded, and something about that shared moment felt different from anything else that had happened so far. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't anything I could have explained if someone had asked me to. It just felt like the first real moment of the whole night. The first time I felt truly seen by someone who wasn't Tyler. I didn't know it yet, but that laugh was the beginning of something neither of us could take back. It was such a small, ordinary thing. Two girls laughing at their tipsy boyfriends at a college party. But looking back now, I think that was the exact moment the night stopped being ordinary at all. At some point, without either of us really deciding to, we drifted away from the noise of the party and ended up near an old stone fountain at the edge of the garden, half hidden beneath a canopy of oak trees. The music from the house was still audible, but softer now, muffled by distance and the rustle of leaves overhead. Vivian sat down on the fountain's edge first, smoothing the fabric of her costume over her knees, and I sat beside her without needing an invitation. It felt natural in a way I didn't examine too closely at the time. For a while, we just talked about nothing important. She asked about my major, I asked about hers. We compared notes on professors we both apparently hated for the exact same reasons. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that fills space without meaning much. But somewhere between one laugh and the next, the tone shifted, so gradually I almost missed it happening. She grew quieter for a moment, staring at the drink in her hands instead of at me, and I felt the air around us change just slightly, like the temperature had dropped a degree without any warning. "Everyone thinks my life is perfect," she said, almost to herself, like she hadn't fully decided to say it out loud until it was already out. Good boyfriend, good grades, good family. It's exhausting, always being the one who has it together. I didn't say anything right away. I just listened, because something in her voice told me this wasn't something she said often. Maybe not ever. Her fingers tightened slightly around her cup, a small, unconscious motion, like she was holding something in besides just her drink. I told her quietly that I understood more than she probably expected. I admitted that sometimes, even with Tyler, even surrounded by friends, I felt strangely invisible, like I was playing a supporting role in my own life instead of living it. It wasn't something I usually said out loud either, but there was something about the darkness of the garden, the distance from the party, the way she'd already handed me a piece of herself, that made it feel safe to hand her one of mine in return. She looked at me then, really looked, in a way that made my stomach tighten unexpectedly. "I didn't expect you to say that," she said softly. "You always seem so sure of yourself." I laughed a little, shaking my head, telling her that people were good at hiding things, that maybe we were all just better at performing than we realized. She nodded slowly, like something about that idea settled into her uncomfortably, like she recognized herself too clearly in my words. The silence that followed wasn't awkward exactly, but it wasn't quite comfortable either. It felt charged somehow, heavier than a silence between two new acquaintances should feel. I noticed the way she kept her eyes on the fountain instead of on me, the way her jaw tightened slightly like she was holding back more words than she was letting out. I didn't understand yet why my heart was beating a little faster than it should have been for such an ordinary conversation. I just knew that something about sitting there with her felt different from anything else that night. At one point, her hand shifted slightly on the stone ledge between us, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin without either of us actually touching. Neither of us moved away. Neither of us moved closer either. It was such a small thing, a few inches of empty space between two hands, but I remember being acutely aware of it, more aware than I had any reason to be. I told myself it was just proximity, just the natural closeness of two people sharing a quiet moment. I wasn't ready yet to admit it might be something else. She asked me carefully if I ever felt like I was living the life other people expected of me instead of the one I actually wanted. I didn't answer right away. I thought about Tyler, about how easy and safe everything felt with him, and how lately that ease had started to feel more like numbness than comfort. I told her, honestly, that I didn't know anymore, that some days it felt like the right life, and other days it felt like a costume I hadn't chosen to wear. She nodded slowly, like she understood exactly what I meant, maybe better than anyone else ever had. I feel that too, she admitted, her voice quieter now, almost fragile. More than I probably should. There was something underneath those words, something she wasn't saying directly, and I felt it land somewhere deep in my chest even though I couldn't have explained why. I remember thinking, in that moment, that I wanted to know what she meant. Exactly. Fully. Without either of us needing to protect ourselves from the answer. We sat there a while longer, the conversation drifting into smaller, safer topics. But something had shifted between us that neither of us acknowledged out loud. The space between her hand and mine never closed completely, but it never grew any wider either. I remember feeling strangely comfortable in that uncertainty, like some part of me didn't need it resolved just yet. Looking back now, I think that was the moment the ground beneath me started tilting. So slowly I didn't even notice I'd already lost my footing. It was Vivian who broke the silence again, though this time her voice sounded different, thinner somehow, like she was pushing the words out before she could talk herself out of saying them. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone here?" she asked, not quite looking at me, her eyes fixed instead on the dark water in the fountain. My heart started beating a little faster, though I couldn't have told you why at the time. I just nodded, quietly, giving her the space to continue. She took a breath, the kind of breath someone takes right before they step off a ledge they've been standing on for a long time. "I like women too," she said softly, the words barely louder than the rustling leaves above us. "Not just Jack. Not just guys in general. I never told anyone that, not even him." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I noticed her hand tighten around her cup again, like she needed something solid to hold on to after finally saying it out loud. I didn't say anything right away, not because I was uncomfortable, but because something about the weight of what she'd just shared made me want to be careful with my response. I could see how much it cost her to say it, the way her shoulders had tensed, the way she still wasn't quite looking at me. I remember feeling a strange kind of honor in that moment, like she'd handed me something fragile and important, something she trusted me not to drop. "Thank you for telling me that," I said quietly, and I meant it more than the simple words could probably convey. She finally looked over at me then, her eyes searching my face for some sign of judgment or discomfort, and when she didn't find any, something in her posture softened, just slightly. It was such a small shift, barely noticeable to anyone else, but I felt it land somewhere deep in my chest, like relief passing between us without either of us naming it. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," she admitted, laughing softly under her breath, though there wasn't much humor in it. "Maybe it's the drinks, maybe it's just, you're easy to talk to." I told her I understood, that sometimes the right person just happens to be there at the right moment, and that didn't need to mean anything more complicated than that. Even as I said it, some small part of me wondered if I actually believed it. Her hand shifted again on the stone ledge between us, closer now, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin without either of us actually touching. Neither of us moved away this time. I remember staring straight ahead at the fountain, very aware of the few inches separating her hand from mine, aware of my own heartbeat in a way that felt almost embarrassing. I told myself it was just the natural comfort of an intimate conversation, nothing more than that. I wasn't ready yet to examine why my body seemed to disagree. "Does Jack know how you really feel?" I asked carefully, not wanting to push too hard, but needing to understand more about what she'd just shared. She shook her head slowly, her eyes drifting back down to her hands. "He knows I love him," she said. "He just doesn't know all of me. Not the parts I've been too scared to show anyone." Son, there was something so quietly devastating in the way she said it, like she'd been carrying that secret so long it had become a kind of second skin. I found myself wanting to ask more, wanting to understand what exactly she meant by all of me, but something in her expression told me she wasn't ready to go further than she already had. Instead, I just sat with her in the silence that followed, letting her know without words that I wasn't going anywhere, that whatever she'd just handed me was safe. It felt like the least I could do, considering how much courage it must have taken her to say what she'd said. We stayed like that for a while, the space between our hands still unclosed, the air between us still charged with something neither of us was naming out loud. I remember feeling strangely protective of her in that moment. This girl I'd only just met hours earlier, like her secret had somehow made her more real to me than anyone else at that party. I didn't understand yet why my chest felt so tight, why my skin felt so aware of hers even without contact. I just knew that something between us had shifted again, quietly, irreversibly, in a direction I wasn't ready to name. Somewhere between one drink and the next, Vivian stood up and reached for my hand, tilting her head toward the house with a look that was equal parts mischievous and shy. "Let's hide from the chaos for a minute," she said, and I didn't ask questions. I just followed her, weaving through the crowd of costumes and laughter, until we reached a quiet hallway near the back of the house, away from the noise, away from Tyler and Jack, and everyone else who might have noticed us slipping away. The bathroom at the end of the hall was lit with a deep red bulb someone had swapped in for the party's theme, casting everything in a strange, dramatic glow. It should have felt silly, almost like a joke, two grown women hiding in a stranger's bathroom at a college party. Instead, the second the door clicked shut behind us, something in the air changed completely. Vivian turned the lock, and the small metallic sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden quiet, louder than it had any right to be. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stood there, close enough that I could hear her breathing, close enough to feel the warmth coming off her skin even without touching. The red light made everything feel unreal, like we'd stepped into some other version of the night, one where the rules of the party outside didn't apply anymore. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it too. And I remember thinking, distantly, that I should say something, anything, to break the silence before it became too heavy to carry. But I didn't say anything. Neither did she. Her eyes moved slowly from my eyes down to my mouth and back up again, and I felt that look land somewhere low in my stomach, a warmth I didn't have a name for yet. She took a step closer, and this time there was no pretending it was accidental. I could see her hand trembling slightly as she reached for my waist, like even she wasn't fully sure of what she was doing, only that she couldn't stop herself from doing it. Her fingers found the fabric at my hip, gentle at first, and then pulling me toward her with a certainty that overrode all of her earlier hesitation. I didn't step back. I want to be honest about that. Some part of me had been waiting for this exact moment, without letting myself admit it, all night. Maybe even before that, in ways I hadn't let myself examine. The space between us disappeared, and then her mouth was on mine, soft and searching, and every thought in my head went completely quiet. It wasn't gentle for long. There was an urgency underneath it, like something we'd both been holding back for hours finally broke loose at once. Her hands moved to the fabric at my back, gripping it like she needed something to hold on to, and I found myself doing the same without deciding to, fingers curling into the leather of her costume like I was afraid the moment might slip away if I let go. I remember feeling dizzy, not from the alcohol, but from the sheer, overwhelming reality of what was happening, the way my whole body seemed to be listening to her instead of my mind. There was a strange kind of relief in finally giving in to something I hadn't even let myself name. It felt like exhaling after holding your breath for far too long, like something inside me had been clenched tight all night and had finally, quietly, let go. I remember the taste of her lip gloss, sweet and slightly like cherries, and the softness of her hair brushing against my hand as I reached up without thinking. Nothing about it felt wrong in that moment, even though some distant part of me knew it probably should have. We stayed like that for what felt like both no time at all and much longer than it actually was. The world outside that small, red-lit room completely forgotten. At some point, her forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing hard, neither of us saying a word, like words might break whatever fragile thing had just happened between us. I remember thinking, in that strange suspended moment, that I already knew this wasn't going to be something I could simply forget in the morning. Some part of me already understood that everything had just changed, even if I wasn't ready to admit how much. The knock on the door came sharper and more insistent the second time, someone outside laughing and asking if anyone was even still in there. We broke apart quickly, both of us a little breathless, both of us trying and failing to smooth down hair that had gotten thoroughly disheveled. Vivian caught my eye in the mirror for just a second, and instead of embarrassment, I saw something like quiet wonder there, like she was as surprised by what had just happened as I was. We fixed what we could, which wasn't much, and unlocked the door, stepping back out into the hallway like two people trying very hard to look like nothing had happened at all. We slipped back into the hallway trying to look normal, though I doubt either of us succeeded completely. My hands were still unsteady, and I could feel my own pulse in my throat as we made our way back toward the noise of the party. Vivian grabbed my hand again, not casually this time, but deliberately, lacing her fingers through mine like she needed the contact to stay grounded. Neither of us said a word as we moved through the crowd, slipping past groups of costumed strangers until we reached the dark edge of the garden again. She pulled me behind one of the massive old oak trees at the far end of the yard, away from the string lights, away from anyone who might glance over and notice two girls who'd clearly just left a bathroom together looking far too flushed. The moment we were hidden in the shadows, she turned to face me, and there was a softness in her expression now, different from the urgency of a few minutes earlier. This kiss was slower, quieter, like we both understood there was no rush left in us, only the need to hold on to the feeling a little longer before the night swallowed it back up. Her hand came up to rest against my cheek, gentle in a way that made my chest ache in the best and worst way possible. I remember closing my eyes, letting myself feel the warmth of her palm against my skin, the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to both of us. It felt tender in a way that scared me more than the urgency had, because urgency could be explained away as impulse, but tenderness felt like something closer to truth. When we finally pulled back, we were both smiling, breathless, a little dazed by everything that had just happened. "I think I might be done kissing men for the rest of my life," I said, half laughing, still not entirely sure I meant it as a joke. Vivian laughed too, quiet and warm, resting her forehead against mine for a moment, like she needed to catch her breath. "I think I might be single," I added. And somehow that made us both laugh harder, the kind of laughter that comes from nerves and disbelief tangled together, still riding the edge of everything we'd both had to drink that night. For a moment, standing there behind that tree, it felt like nothing outside that small patch of darkness existed at all. No boyfriends, no expectations, no complicated questions about what any of this meant for tomorrow. It was just the two of us, tangled in laughter and something warmer underneath it. And for the first time all night, I felt completely, unapologetically happy. I didn't want to move. I didn't want the moment to end and force us back into a world where none of this had happened yet. But eventually, the pull of the party dragged our attention back, the way real life always does no matter how much you wish it wouldn't. We stepped out from behind the tree, still holding hands, still laughing softly at nothing in particular, feeling lighter than either of us probably had any right to feel. I remember thinking, in that fleeting golden moment, that whatever happened next, at least tonight, had been real. At least tonight, I had felt something true for the first time in longer than I wanted to admit. That's when we saw them. Tyler and Jack, standing near the drinks table, deep in conversation with two girls neither of us recognized, laughing a little too easily, standing a little too close. It wasn't anything overtly wrong, not exactly, but something about the ease of it, the ease of them enjoying themselves without us, without a single thought about where we'd disappeared to, made my stomach twist in a way I didn't expect. Vivian's hand tightened slightly around mine, and I felt her body go still beside me. Neither of us said anything at first. We just stood there, watching from a distance, still glowing from what had just happened between us, now suddenly confronted with the reality of the lives we'd left waiting on the other side of that garden. I felt Vivian's grip on my hand loosen slightly, not in retreat, but like she was bracing herself for whatever came next. I remember looking at her, searching her face for some sign of what she was thinking, and finding only the same uncertainty I felt twisting through my own chest. I still didn't know in that moment what any of it meant for the rest of the night, let alone for whatever came after it. All I knew was that something had shifted permanently between us, something that couldn't simply be laughed off or explained away by alcohol and bad lighting. Vivian turned to look at me, her eyes searching mine with a quiet, unspoken question neither of us was ready to say out loud yet. And standing there in the dark, watching our boyfriends laugh with strangers, I had no idea just how much that single decision was about to change everything. Vivian was the one who spoke first, her voice quiet, but certain in a way that surprised me. "Let's just go," she said, not looking away from where Tyler and Jack stood laughing with those two strangers like we didn't exist. There was no anger in her tone. Not exactly, just something tired and resolved, like she'd already made up her mind before the words even left her mouth. I didn't argue. Some part of me had already decided the same thing the moment I saw them standing there so easily entertained without us. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen for a second longer than it should have. It felt strange, typing out a message to Tyler while my hand was still laced through Vivian's, while my lips still remembered the taste of someone else entirely. For half a second, I almost deleted what I'd written. Some old habit of loyalty tugging at the back of my mind, telling me this wasn't how tonight was supposed to end. But I sent it anyway, a short message telling him to enjoy the rest of the party with his new friends, that I was heading out and we'd talk tomorrow. Vivian did the same, typing a similarly light message to Jack, her expression unreadable in the dim light spilling out from the house behind us. Neither of us said much as we made our way toward the front of the property, slipping past clusters of costumed strangers who had no idea what kind of night we'd just had. The autumn air outside felt sharp and clean after the warmth of the party, a welcome shock against my flushed skin. I remember feeling strangely powerful in that moment, like I'd just made the boldest decision of my entire life without fully understanding what it meant yet. We called a car and climbed into the back seat together, and the second the door shut behind us, the silence between us grew heavier than it had been all night. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was different now, charged with everything unsaid between two people who had just crossed a line neither of them had planned for. Vivian reached over and turned on the radio, some quiet indie song filling the small space, only to reach over and turn it off again seconds later, like even music felt like too much noise for what was happening inside her. I stared out the window, watching the lights of the fraternity house shrink behind us, feeling my heartbeat pick up with every passing block. Somewhere around the third turn, my hand drifted toward the door handle without me fully deciding to move it there. Some small, anxious part of me considering, just for a second, whether I should ask the driver to stop, whether I should go back, undo everything, pretend none of it had happened. But I didn't say anything. I let my hand fall back into my lap, and I let the car keep moving forward, toward whatever was waiting for us at the end of this ride. Vivian glanced over at me once, like she'd noticed my hesitation without needing me to say a word about it. She didn't ask if I was okay. Not directly, but her hand found mine again on the seat between us, her fingers lacing through mine with a gentleness that felt like reassurance and terror wrapped into the same gesture. I remember thinking, in that quiet moment, that I had no idea what I was doing, no real plan, no clear sense of where any of this was headed. All I knew was that turning back now felt somehow more impossible than moving forward into the unknown. The city passed by in a blur of streetlights and quiet storefronts, the kind of late-night stillness that makes everything feel a little unreal. I kept sneaking glances at her profile in the passing light, the sharp line of her jaw, the softness of her mouth, still slightly swollen from earlier. Every time our eyes met, something electric passed between us, unspoken but undeniable. A silent agreement that neither of us was turning back now, whatever waited for us on the other side of the ride. When the car finally pulled up outside her apartment building, neither of us moved right away. We just sat there for a moment, the engine humming quietly beneath us, both of us caught somewhere between excitement and fear. I remember my hands trembling slightly as I reached for the door handle, not from the cold, but from something closer to anticipation, the kind that comes right before you do something you can't take back. Vivian looked at me one more time before opening her door, her eyes searching mine for permission, or maybe just for reassurance that I wanted this as much as she clearly did. I nodded, barely, but it was enough. We stepped out of the car together, walking quickly toward the building entrance like if we moved fast enough, doubt wouldn't have time to catch up to us. My heart was pounding so hard by the time we reached her door that I could barely hear anything else, not the quiet city around us, not even my own thoughts anymore. All I could focus on was her hand still wrapped around mine, steady despite everything, guiding me forward into whatever came next. The door barely closed behind us before the rest of the world seemed to disappear completely. Vivian's apartment was quiet, dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner, and for a moment we just stood there in the entryway, neither of us quite ready to break the silence with words. My hands were still trembling slightly as I set my bag down, not from the cold anymore, but from something closer to nerves. The kind that come right before a moment you know you can't take back once it happens. She stepped closer, reaching for the edge of my sleeve, her fingers brushing against the fabric with a gentleness that made my breath catch in my throat. I could see her hands were shaking too, just slightly, despite how composed she always seemed to everyone else. There was something almost unbearably tender about that. The idea that beneath all her poise, she was just as nervous as I was, just as unsure of what we were doing, only certain that neither of us wanted to stop. Neither of us said much of anything after that. Words felt unnecessary, almost intrusive, against everything we'd already said to each other without speaking a single sentence all night. I remember the soft warmth of the lamplight, the quiet hum of the city outside her window, the way my own heartbeat seemed to fill the entire room. What happened between us that night was tender and slow, full of the kind of quiet, overwhelming closeness that comes only once in a great while, and it belongs only to the two of us. I woke up hours later to soft morning light filtering through her curtains, my head pounding faintly from the night before, my body still wrapped comfortably in her arms. For one brief, golden moment, before my mind fully caught up with reality, everything felt warm and right, like waking up exactly where I was supposed to be. Then the memories came flooding back all at once, sharp and disorienting, and my stomach dropped so suddenly it felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. I sat up too quickly, my head spinning from both the hangover and the sudden wave of panic crashing through my chest. Vivian stirred beside me, blinking awake slowly, clearly still half lost in sleep, until she saw the look on my face and immediately understood something was wrong. "Hey," she said softly, reaching for my arm, her voice still rough with sleep but gentle, careful, like she already knew exactly what I was feeling without needing me to explain it. "I don't know what we did," I whispered, though of course I knew exactly what we'd done, my mind just refusing to fully accept it yet. My hands were trembling again, this time from fear instead of anticipation. My thoughts racing through Tyler, through everything I thought I knew about my own life just 24 hours earlier. Vivian sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around herself, watching me with an expression that held more patience than I probably deserved in that moment. "It's okay," she said quietly, though I could hear the slight tremor beneath her own calm tone, like she was trying to convince herself just as much as she was trying to convince me. She got up and disappeared into the small kitchen, and a few minutes later returned with 2 cups of tea, setting one gently in front of me like a peace offering. I noticed her hands were still shaking slightly as she held her own cup, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear behind her otherwise composed expression. "Talk to me," she said softly, sitting back down beside me, careful not to get too close, like she sensed I needed space even though every part of her clearly wanted to reach for me instead. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out, just a tangled mess of fear and confusion I didn't know how to put into words yet. My hands wrapped around the warm cup, more out of something to hold on to than any real desire for tea, my mind spinning too fast to focus on anything except the overwhelming urge to run. I drank the tea in silence, barely tasting it, my thoughts a chaotic blur of guilt and disbelief, and something else underneath it all that scared me even more than the guilt did. When I finally stood up to leave, Vivian didn't try to stop me, though I could see in her eyes how much she wanted to. I mumbled something about needing time, about needing to think, and she nodded quietly, watching me gather my things with an expression that looked like heartbreak, trying very hard to disguise itself as understanding. I left without looking back, not because I didn't care, but because I was terrified of exactly how much I did. The days after that morning felt like moving through fog, everyone around me acting completely normal while I quietly fell apart on the inside. I went back to my usual routine, classes, study groups, dinners with Tyler, all of it exactly the same as before, except nothing about it felt the same to me anymore. Every time Tyler reached for my hand or kissed me goodnight, something in my chest tightened uncomfortably, like my body was rejecting a life that used to fit me perfectly. I hadn't spoken to Vivian since that morning, not one single word, though I thought about her constantly, in ways that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I told myself the distance was for the best, that whatever happened between us had been a strange alcohol-fueled mistake we could both quietly forget with enough time. But forgetting proved harder than I expected, especially with Jack still around, still part of our shared friend group, still completely unaware of everything that had happened that night. About 2 weeks later, Jack found me outside the campus coffee shop, smiling in that easy, warm way he always did, completely unaware of the storm quietly raging inside me. "Hey, Emma," he said, falling into step beside me like we were old friends, which I suppose, in a way, we were. "Vivian's been acting kind of off lately. Did something happen between you two at that party? She won't really talk about it." My stomach dropped instantly, though I forced my expression to stay neutral, forced a small laugh that felt entirely hollow even to my own ears. "I'm not sure," I lied, the words tasting bitter and wrong in my mouth. Jack nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer, completely trusting, completely unsuspecting. "She's lucky to have a friend like you," he added, his voice so sincere it made my chest ache with guilt. "You always seem to make her laugh." I managed a small smile, though inside I felt like the worst kind of person imaginable, standing there accepting his kindness while carrying a secret that would probably destroy him if he ever found out. That was the thing about Jack, the thing that made everything so much harder than it needed to be. He wasn't cruel or careless or anything close to a villain in this story. He was simply quietly good, the kind of person who deserved honesty, not the tangled mess of guilt and longing I was carrying around instead. Every time he smiled at me, every time he mentioned Vivian with genuine affection in his voice, I felt smaller, more monstrous, like I was stealing something precious from someone who had never done anything except be kind. A few weeks after that, at a small end-of-semester gathering, I saw Vivian again for the first time since that morning. She looked composed as always, laughing politely at something someone said, though I noticed the tension in her shoulders the moment our eyes met across the room. Before I could figure out what to say to her, a girl named Sophie approached me. The same girl I'd briefly met at the costume party, warm and confident in a way that immediately drew attention. Sophie leaned casually against the counter beside me, striking up easy conversation, complimenting my outfit, asking about my classes with genuine interest. She was undeniably charming, the kind of effortless confidence that made people want to be near her, and I found myself laughing along despite the storm still raging quietly inside me. I didn't notice at first the way Vivian's expression shifted from across the room, the way her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as she watched Sophie's hand brush lightly against my arm. It wasn't until later that night, when Vivian pulled me aside near a quiet hallway, that I understood what I'd missed. "You looked pretty comfortable with her," she said quietly, her voice tighter than usual, an edge of something raw and unguarded slipping through her usually composed exterior. I opened my mouth to explain, though I wasn't entirely sure what there was to explain. And that's when I saw it. The way her eyes glistened slightly under the dim hallway lighting. The way her hands trembled faintly at her sides. "I know I have no right to feel this way," she said, her voice breaking slightly, quieter now, almost pleading. "I know you have your own life, and I know this isn't fair to you. But I can't keep pretending I'm not falling apart every time I think about you with someone else." Her confession hung heavy in the air between us, raw and unguarded in a way I hadn't seen from her before, not even that night at the party. And standing there in that quiet hallway, watching her composure crack completely for the first time, I realized I wasn't the only one who had been drowning in silence this whole time. I didn't know what to say at first, standing there in that narrow hallway with Vivian's confession still hanging heavy in the air between us. Before I could find the words, though, someone called her name from the other room, and she quickly wiped at her eyes, forcing her expression back into something composed, something safe for public consumption. She excused herself, disappearing back into the party, leaving me standing there alone with my own racing heart and no clear idea of what to do next. Over the following week, I heard through mutual friends that Vivian's parents had come to visit campus, the kind of visit that came with expectations neither of us ever talked about openly. Her mother, apparently, had spent the entire weekend gently steering conversations toward marriage, toward stability, toward the kind of future that fit neatly into family photographs. Jack, sweet and hopeful as always, had been invited along for most of it, treated by her parents like he was already practically part of the family. I found out through Jack himself, actually, who mentioned it to me almost cheerfully one afternoon on campus, completely unaware of what his words were doing to my chest. "Vivian's parents love me," he said, laughing a little, though there was real hope behind the joke. "Her mom's already planning a dinner next week, some big family thing. I think she's trying to nudge us toward the next step, if you know what I mean." My stomach tightened instantly, though I forced a smile, congratulating him the way a good friend was supposed to, even while something inside me quietly panicked. I texted Vivian that night, something simple, asking if she wanted to talk, though I wasn't entirely sure what I would even say if she answered. She didn't respond right away, and when she finally did, her message felt careful, guarded, completely unlike the raw honesty she'd shown me in that hallway. She mentioned the dinner briefly, almost casually, like she was testing how I'd react, like some part of her was hoping I'd tell her not to go, even though neither of us had any right to make that kind of claim on each other yet. I remember staring at my phone for a long time that night, my thumb hovering over the reply button, torn between respecting whatever boundaries still existed between us and the overwhelming fear of losing her entirely to a life that clearly wasn't making her happy. Eventually, I set the phone down without responding, telling myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that I had no right to ask her to blow up her entire life for something that had only existed in stolen, uncertain moments. But sleep didn't come easily that night, my mind replaying her voice in that hallway over and over again. The day before the dinner, I ran into Sophie on campus, and something about her easy smile suddenly felt hollow compared to what I'd been carrying around for weeks. She mentioned casually that she'd heard about Vivian's family dinner, that everyone assumed an engagement announcement might be coming soon. Something about hearing it stated so plainly, so certainly, snapped something loose inside me, a clarity I hadn't let myself feel until that exact moment. I realized, suddenly and completely, that I wasn't willing to just stand by and watch this happen without saying anything. I found Vivian later that afternoon, sitting alone on a bench near the quad, staring blankly at nothing in particular, clearly lost somewhere deep inside her own head. She looked up when she saw me approaching, surprise flickering briefly across her face before settling into something more guarded, more careful. I sat down beside her without asking permission, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts over the sound of it. "I need to say something, and I need you to actually hear it," I said, my voice steadier than I expected given how nervous I felt inside. What happened between us wasn't just the alcohol talking. I've spent weeks trying to convince myself it was, but it wasn't. And I don't think you believe that either. Not really. Her eyes filled instantly, her carefully composed expression finally cracking completely. Right there in the middle of a crowded quad where anyone could have seen us. "I don't want you to go to that dinner and pretend to be something you're not, just because it's easier for everyone else," I continued, my own voice trembling now too. "You deserve to stop performing a life that isn't actually yours." She didn't say anything for a long moment, just sat there with tears silently slipping down her cheeks, her hands trembling in her lap. Then, slowly, she reached over and took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine right there in the open, in front of anyone who happened to be walking by. "I already called my mom this morning," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I told her there wasn't going to be a dinner. I just didn't know how to tell you that I was terrified of doing this without you standing beside me when I did." We sat there on that bench for a long time after she said it, her hand still wrapped tightly around mine, neither of us in any hurry to move or speak again right away. The quad around us kept moving, students walking past with backpacks and coffee cups, completely unaware that two lives had just quietly rearranged themselves in front of them. I remember feeling something loosen in my chest, some knot I'd been carrying for weeks finally beginning to untangle, thread by thread, with every second her hand stayed in mine. I was so scared of what this meant, I admitted softly, watching a group of students pass without really seeing them. Not just about Tyler, or what people would think. I was scared of how much I wanted it to be real. Vivian turned to look at me then, her eyes still glassy but steadier now, like something had settled inside her the moment she'd said the words out loud to her mother that morning. "I know," she said quietly. "I've been scared of the exact same thing since the moment you shook my hand at that party." She told me slowly, piece by piece, about the conversation with her mother, how her voice had shaken the entire time, how she'd expected anger and gotten confused silence instead, which somehow felt worse and lighter all at once. She hadn't told her everything, not yet, just that the dinner wasn't happening, that things with Jack needed to change. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was a real first step, the kind that takes more courage than people usually give it credit for. I told her, honestly, that I hadn't figured out exactly how to talk to Tyler yet, either, that some part of me was still terrified of hurting someone who had never done anything except love me the best way he knew how. She nodded, understanding completely, no judgment in her expression at all. "We don't have to have it all figured out today," she said softly, squeezing my hand gently. "We just have to stop pretending we don't feel what we feel." There was something quietly profound about sitting there in broad daylight, in the middle of a crowded quad, finally allowing ourselves to simply exist together without hiding, without shame clouding every glance we exchanged. It felt entirely different from the charged secrecy of the bathroom, from the frantic urgency of that first night. This was calmer, steadier, Something closer to the beginning of an actual life instead of a stolen moment we'd have to bury by morning. Over the following days, we both found the courage, separately, to have the harder conversations we'd been avoiding. I sat down with Tyler and told him honestly that something had shifted in me, something I couldn't ignore anymore. And though it broke his heart in ways I still feel guilty about, he deserved that honesty far more than he deserved my silence. Vivian, in her own time, sat down with Jack, telling him gently but clearly that she needed to be honest about who she really was, even though it meant unraveling 2 years of shared history. Neither conversation was easy. Neither ending was clean or painless, exactly the way real endings rarely are. But there was a kind of relief in finally choosing honesty over comfort, in finally letting the people we cared about see the truth, instead of a carefully maintained performance. I remember calling Vivian the night after my conversation with Tyler, both of us quiet on the phone for a long moment before she finally asked, gently, if I was okay. "I will be," I told her, and for the first time in weeks, I actually believed it. We didn't rush anything after that, not wanting to repeat the same mistake of moving faster than either of us was emotionally ready for. Instead, we let things unfold slowly, deliberately, meeting for coffee between classes, taking quiet walks around campus in the evenings, learning each other in the daylight instead of hidden corners and locked doors. It felt different this time, steadier, less like something we needed to hide, and more like something we were quietly, carefully building. By the time winter arrived, we had told our closest friends the truth, gently, one conversation at a time, and most of them responded with more warmth and understanding than either of us had expected. There were still hard days, still moments of doubt or fear about what other people might think. But underneath all of it was something solid now, something neither of us had felt with anyone else before. I remember thinking, watching Vivian laugh freely at something small one evening, that this, finally, felt like the first fully honest chapter of my entire life. Spring came faster than I expected it to, the way seasons sometimes do when you're finally living inside your own life instead of watching it happen from a distance. Almost 6 months had passed since that costume party, since the red light in that bathroom, since the version of me who thought she had everything figured out quietly disappeared and something truer took her place. I barely recognized that girl anymore, the one who used to shrink herself just enough to fit comfortably into someone else's expectations. Vivian and I made it official just after the new year. Nothing dramatic or rushed, just a quiet acknowledgement between us that what we'd built deserved a name. Telling people got easier with time, though I won't pretend every conversation was painless. Some friends needed time to adjust. A few distant relatives still asked careful, hesitant questions. But the people who mattered most stayed close. And slowly, the fear that once lived in my chest, every time someone looked at us together, started to fade into something quieter, steadier. Tyler and I still see each other occasionally, in that careful, polite way people manage after love ends without cruelty. It took months before I stopped feeling guilty every time I saw him laugh at something, half expecting to see resentment in his eyes instead. Last I heard, he's doing well, dating someone new, and somehow that news brought me more relief than sadness. Jack, too, eventually found his footing again. And though things between him and Vivian remain complicated in quiet ways, there's no bitterness left between any of us anymore. Just the soft ache of a chapter closed with as much grace as any of us could manage. This morning, walking to class, Vivian met me outside the library like she does most days now, her hand finding mine without either of us thinking twice about who might be watching. We walked together down the crowded main hallway of the university, surrounded by hundreds of students rushing to their own lives, none of them paying any particular attention to 2 girls simply holding hands in the daylight. It struck me, somewhere in the middle of that hallway, just how far we'd come from that dark, secretive bathroom where this whole story quietly began. "I didn't come here today scared," I told her, squeezing her hand gently as we walked, the autumn air from that first party feeling like a lifetime ago now. She smiled at me, the same soft, knowing smile she'd given me the very first night we met. Except now there was nothing hidden behind it, nothing guarded or afraid. "Neither did I," she said simply. And somehow those 3 words carried the weight of everything we'd both survived to get here. I think about that first night often. The fountain in the garden, the red light in that bathroom, the fear in my chest the morning after. I used to think falling for her was the most terrifying mistake I'd ever made, something shameful I needed to bury and forget as quickly as possible. Now I understand it was simply the truest thing that had ever happened to me, arriving in the middle of a life I thought was already finished being written. Love doesn't always show up the way you expect it to. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as guilt, as fear, as a secret you're too scared to say out loud at first. But if you're lucky, if you're brave enough to stop running from it, it becomes something steady instead. Something you can finally walk through a crowded hallway holding without flinching. I used to think I lost myself the night I met Vivian Cole. Now I understand I finally found the person I was always meant to become. If this story moved you the way it moved me to live it, consider supporting more stories like this one on our Patreon, where we bring you deeper, more personal chapters you won't find anywhere else. Leave a like if you felt every bit of this journey with me, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're listening from tonight. Thank you for walking through this story with me, from that first nervous glance across a crowded party, all the way to this quiet, sunlit hallway where it finally, gently, ends.